Hi, boys and girls. This is our second read of The Garden in our brand new Unit 5 textbook. And this is Arnold Lobel. He wrote and he drew the pictures for this story. Today, we're going to look at the vocabulary words and we're going to talk a little bit about the story structure after we finish reading it. So let's go ahead and go through the vocabulary words. These are not the sight words on your test, but they're words in the story that are a little bit harder than the other ones. So let's talk about them. This one says candles. Candles make light. You light the wick on the top of them, and it creates some light. And remember that Toad lit some candles to keep his seeds from being afraid of the dark. Okay, this big word says frightened. Do you remember Toad frightened, or at least he thought he frightened his seeds by yelling at them? Frightened. Fright, and then all of this, and frightened. Okay, poems. When you write lines that rhyme, those are called poems. So a lot of the songs that we sing, they started out as poems, and then people put music to them or tunes to them. So poems. That word says poems. And here is the word shouted. When you say something in a super loud voice, you shout. And Toad shouted at his seeds when they wouldn't grow. And this word says, of course. So, like, when you expect something to happen, like, of course it will happen. Or, I'm just certain it will happen. Of course. I don't know how to explain that word, but it's in your story. Okay, let's go ahead and read it. And today, I would like you to put your fingers right on top of mine on the screen and read with me. Hope you can read your sight words from yesterday. I hope you can read the story words from today as we read it. Okay, are you ready? Begin. The garden. From Frog and Toad Together by Arnold Lobel. Look at all this. This is like a second grader's book. Okay, let's read it. Frog was in his garden. Toad came walking by. "What a fine garden you have, Frog," he said. "Yes," said Frog, "it is very nice, but it was hard work." Let me stop right there. This picture matches those words because there's his garden. He's about to give him the flower seeds. He was working. "I wish I had a garden," said Toad. "Here are some flower seeds. Plant them in the ground," said Frog, "and soon you will have a garden." "How soon?" asked Toad. "Quite soon," said Frog. Toad ran home. He planted the flower seeds. "Now, seeds," said Toad, "start growing." Toad walked up and down a few times. The seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head close to the ground and said loudly, "Now, seeds, start growing." Toad looked at the ground again. The seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head very close to the ground and shouted, "Now, seeds, start growing!" Frog came running up the path. "What is all this noise?" he asked. My seeds will not grow, said Toad. You are shouting too much, said Frog. These poor seeds are afraid to grow. My seeds are afraid to grow? Asked Toad. Of course, said Frog. Leave them alone for a few days. Let the sun shine on them. Let the rain fall on them. Soon your seeds will start to grow. That night, Toad looked out of his window. Drat, said Toad. My seeds have not started to grow. They must be afraid of the dark. Toad went out to his garden with some candles. I will read the seeds a story, said Toad. Then they will not be afraid. Toad read a long story to his seeds. All the next day, Toad sang songs to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad read poems to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad played music for his seeds. Toad looked at the ground. Well, he's not looking right there. The seeds still did not start to grow. What shall I do? Cried Toad. These must be the most frightened seeds in the whole world. Then Toad felt very tired, and he fell asleep. Toad, Toad, wake up, said Frog. Look at your garden. Toad looked at his garden. Little green plants were coming up out of the ground. At last, shouted Toad, my seeds have stopped being afraid to grow. And now you will have a nice garden too, said Frog. Yes, said Toad, but you were right, Frog. It was very hard work. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about how the author, which is, what's his name? Arnold Lobel, how he structured this story. He first decided who his characters were going to be. He says, who's my story going to be about? I think I'll have a frog and a toad. So he decided on his characters. Then he decided where his story was going to take place. He says, I think my frog and toad are going to live outside in the country. And so the setting for his story is outside in the country where you can grow gardens. And then he decided what the story was going to be, the plot. He was going to decide what the problems were going to be. So he decided that the problems would be that this toad, in his ignorance, would not be able to know about how long it would take. Well, anyways, the problem is he didn't know that it took seeds a long time to grow. So that was his problem. He thought they were supposed to grow right away, and because he thought they were afraid, he was going to solve the problem by shouting at them and singing to them, reading poems to them, playing music for them, putting candles out for them, reading stories to them. So he's trying to solve that problem of the seeds not growing with all of those activities. But really, boys and girls, the solution to them growing was just what Frog said, that he was just going to have to let the sun shine on them and the rain fall on them for a few days before they started growing. So anyway, that's a little bit on the story structure, and that's our reading for the day. So um, I'm glad you were here for your second read. Bye bye.